This week on Writers Inc.
I think the answer to that is just sort of you dig really deep into character. At least it works for me. When you sort of figure out why people do what they do, what sort of motivates them to take this action as opposed to this one, I think you sort of elevate your stuff beyond the stereotypical because you're digging really deep. You're going to internal motivations and conflicts and stuff like that. And I think it gives characters a depth.
J.K. Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Carrie in a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller J.D. Barker and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories. All have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out. School's in session. This is Writers Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
JP Rindfleisch.
Kevin Tumlinson.
And this is JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. So last week we talked about putting podcasts on YouTube. So Writers Inc. is now on YouTube. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
for knocking that out in a couple of days. It's actually pretty cool. He's got some cool graphics going on and things to substitute for the fact that there's no real video there. So we'll see how that goes. But he's going to put out the current episodes, and I think he said he's going to try and do like one or two old episodes each week too. So like 2 or 3 of them a week until he gets caught up. So we'll see what happens.
That's going to your YouTube channel. Are we thinking about building a YouTube channel?
I think we could. I already had one, and it just seemed way easier to just use that. But at some point we should probably bump it out of there. I don't have a whole lot of stuff on there to begin with, so I guess it's not a big deal.
All your family related stuff, right? It's all like
well, we've been filming. I think I told you guys we got chickens, right? Did I mention that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got them, and they were, I think, like 2 weeks old when we got them. So these little tiny chicks, and we've been dropping a video camera in there with them once a week and just capturing them just walking around in their little thing. So we've got like 3 or 4 weeks worth of them getting older and older on video, and I've got no idea if we can actually use that for something, but we might. Like I've been working with my daughter and teaching her how to use computers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it might be a fun thing just to edit on iMovie. Just to
set up a live cam and just live stream your chickens.
Chicken cam.
No,
24/7.
You know what's going to happen if I do that? Then I'm going to end up catching one of the predators that sneaks in there at 3:00 in the morning and eats all the chickens. And I don't know if I want that on video. I've been told I've got to keep foxes out. I've got to keep skunks out. I've got to keep this out, keep that out. And that's going to be a nightmare.
As true for life as it is for chicken coops. Keep all the foxes, all of that out.
And what else is going on? ITW, International Thriller Writers, we just made some changes over to our active memberships. So mainly for indie authors. So, obviously the indie, that I don't want to call it a movement. That's probably the wrong word. But like that segment of the publishing industry has been growing, pretty steadily for years now. ITW basically started off as a traditional published type organization. All the authors were traditionally published. But we've noticed in membership that's been skewing. And it's always been tricky to try and figure out how to, approve, not approve, and that sort of thing. So we changed our guidelines. So now if you're an indie author and you've made at least $5,000 over the last 12 months on one or more titles, you qualify for active membership. And what that basically means is you can enter your books for the contest, the Thriller Awards. So if you are an indie author and you're not a member of ITW and you're writing thrillers, you should be a member. Give it a look.
That's very similar to the guidelines for NINC as well.
Mm-hmm.
Novelist Inc.
Yeah, when we did this, we basically pulled the guidelines for all the different writerly type organizations and kind of compared all of them and try to come up with something that fit everybody.
Okay, no AI is welcome though.
No AI is welcome for sure.
When do we get the AI category?
I guess we have to talk about it, right? So GPT-4 just came out, and I've seen a lot of like random things pop up. There's a video circulating right now with, and I don't know, and I should know who this guy is. He's the president of the company. He's the head designer. He's the head AI. He might not even be a real person for all we know. But there's one video of him basically sketching out a website on a piece of notebook paper. Just literally slaps a couple boxes, some text on a piece of notebook paper, scans it in, and within like seconds, the AI creates the code for a website and then generates a working website, working links and everything based on that image. that scared the piss out of me. I don't know about the rest of you. Just from, I know how much work goes into creating a website, or how much work used to have to go into creating a website. And that's just one example of AI being used. I've seen other ones where I saw one where somebody took their picture. They basically took a bunch of snapshots of themselves, uploaded those to an AI, and they were able to put themselves into, a million different scenarios. If they wanted to be on the moon, if they wanted blonde hair, if they wanted to be 40 years older, like anything you could possibly think of, they could do within a second, all based on that sort of thing. So have you guys played with any of this like recently, like any of the upgrades?
A little bit. Did some of the chat stuff. And, that doesn't seem to have significantly changed, but I was playing around with having it generate headshots for me, which is nice.
As long as you don't get your
nice,
hands in there.
Option.
Because then you end up with 8 fingers and they're kind of all.
I think it's going to get better at that.
Yeah.
Most headshots don't involve hands, so.
So 2 things. One, the image for the website development is not yet available to the public, I believe. It's only the chat feature and then that photo feature. So I still don't know what that looks like. And then Midjourney is actually coming out with their newest version, which has a correction for hands, and they've shown a lot of that. So it's wild.
So they've taught the AI how many fingers we're supposed to have and
which direction they're supposed to go.
And what?
All right. Crazy stuff. What's in the news? The real news.
All right. So Leigh Bardugo, who is the author of Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, has an 8-figure deal with Macmillan Publishers for a dozen books across several imprints. Books will span several formats, age categories, and Macmillan's long-term support for Bardugo, she made a statement highlighting that by doing this and by supporting her, it will also support other authors, because ultimately, I mean, Shadow and Bone is super popular on Netflix. Season 2, I think, just came out. And by supporting her, you're creating all of this material that is clearly getting picked up by other agencies and bringing in revenue for Macmillan. So she really highlights how this benefits the publishing community. And literary agent Samantha Weckstein and other authors emphasized how much of a deal this is for smaller authors. The structure of the payment, obviously she won't be receiving that up front. Instead, it's going to be payment spread across 12 books over multiple years. So pretty big deal, to say the least.
Yeah, so this hits on a couple different things. So it's definitely big for the publisher, and they're obviously betting on a known commodity. They know what this woman's capable of generating. They know what these book titles are going to bring in, and having that in their stable, basically they can use that revenue to go out there and they can take a chance on a debut author and possibly spend a little bit more money than they would have before, bringing in some new product. That's all good. The only thing here that actually gave me any pause just looking at it is, with it being a 12-book deal, from the author standpoint, that's a little scary because, yes, it's a big dollar amount, but when you start breaking it down, it's less than $1 million per title, which, to many authors, that's still a huge payday. But it's a very doable payday. Particularly if you break stuff out, like if you go out there to a publisher and you sell everything a la carte. So you sell World English to somebody, you sell World Spanish to somebody else, you sell audio to somebody else, film and TV to somebody else. Before you know it, you've got 50 deals on the same book, and $1 million isn't that difficult to hit. So when I look at this, somebody who's this successful, where is she going to actually be, 5, 6, 8 books from now? Like, is this a deal that would make financial sense if she were to look back on it, at that point? And I don't know that the answer is yes to that. My typical advice when I'm talking to somebody that has a multi-book deal in front of them is to, stick to like 2 or 3 books maximum. Just mainly because you don't know what's going to happen. Look at Gillian Flynn as an example. She had a 3-book deal. Her first 2 books did okay, but neither hit the New York Times list. And then she wrote Gone Girl. So, what if she had signed that deal at the beginning and Gone Girl had hit first, and those other 2 books would come out later. Like, she technically, if she'd had a 1-book deal, she could have sold that second and third book for far more money if you reverse that equation a little bit. But this isn't all about money. There's a lot of different factors that you've got to consider when you look at it. It's a tremendous deal. It's great, just to see that out there in publishing, see something like this happening.
Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting to me. Just, some people are saying, oh, there's going to be no more money for other authors with this deal, but that's not the case. It's whether it earns out and earns above. And if it's earning above, then that's actually making more money to go to more authors. I wonder though, how many she already has written, because 12 books to me just sounds scary. I wonder if she has some of these written up front, and then maybe it wouldn't be quite so daunting.
That was my first thought, was that this sounds an awful lot like she had maybe, 6 to 8 books already written. And, and they decided, well, we'll just, offer this deal. Wouldn't seem that unusual to me.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we don't know about this. I mean, if you look at the latest deals with Colleen Hoover, she's basically giving a lot of her rights away to traditional publishers, but they're taking a lot of that work off of her plate in exchange for that money. So there's a lot of different ways you've got to look at this kind of thing.
All right. Up next in the news, James Patterson, our good friend, made a comment about if Florida bans his books, then made an opinion that no kids under 12 should go to Marvel movies. So this is obviously a pretty big topic. It's been hitting nationwide about book bans. All over the spectrum, from racism, sexuality, gender identity, and so on. And James Patterson's Maximum Ride series was actually removed from an elementary school library, and it remains accessible for older students, but Patterson has expressed concern about book bans driven by conservative communities. So his view on the removal in an interview argued that Maximum Ride for elementary schools, removing it was unnecessary, and that the book contains no content that should scare anyone. So this obviously is a headline when we have someone like James Patterson making comments like this, and we know the scale of these book bans. So I figured it was topical news.
Yeah, I reached out, but I haven't actually talked to him since this happened. In reading the articles, and I tried to comb as many different ones as I possibly could. It's Martin County, Florida, so it's basically one county. Sounds like it's one school in that county, and it sounds like the decision was made by a very small group of people, if not one person complaining about it. That's the kind of thing that gives me pause. If there's a general consensus, kind of thing to take a book out, then fine. But one person's opinion there, I could walk into a library and probably pull 10 different books out that I personally don't like, that I don't want my daughter to read. I'm not going to put those books in front of my daughter. So I think a lot of these decisions should be made from a parental standpoint. I've read Maximum Drive. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would be problematic at any particular age group. And the reason that I have kind of issue with that is, I was reading at a really young age. So I read all the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews by the time I entered kindergarten. So by the time I was 6 or 7, I was reading stuff like Charles Dickens and things that were, considered to be, for older people. There was no young adult at the time, but those were technically young adult novels. I wouldn't want to take that away from children. You don't want to start making those types of decisions. I really think it should come down to the parents. The parents, have the ability to weigh in on what their child reads. You should be involved, I think, enough in your child's life to be able to have that conversation. If they're going behind your back and they're reading something without your knowledge, that's a whole other conversation that should happen. But I think there should be an open dialogue there. I don't like the idea of other people making those decisions for me.
Yeah. I don't even know how I'd react if I found out. I don't have kids. I'm just going to preface this. So completely ignorant opinion here, but I don't even know how I'd react if I found out my kid was sneaking around behind my back reading. I'm not sure how I would deal with that.
Just in general.
Yeah. But, honest, be honest with yourself. I mean, I'm sure when you were a kid, there were plenty of things that you did behind your parents' back, and reading isn't necessarily one of the worst. No, because I don't know what statute of limitations is on a lot of the things that you probably did. We don't want to air that publicly. That's part of growing up too, but we shouldn't shield them. One of the biggest things that frightens me about all this type of stuff is when you stop talking about, if you take the worst, the Nazi occupation of Europe, if we stop talking about that, chances are it's going to repeat, and
yes.
Everybody knows that. So when you go through and you start cleaning up, whether it's racism or you start taking this out, taking that out and you make it disappear from literature, before you know it, it just disappears from culture. And, we're more likely to make that same mistake again. I would rather have somebody throw our mistakes in our face as often as possible, as a reminder. Same thing goes for the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I my feeling on this sort of thing has mostly been, I understand where they're coming from in terms of trying to limit the sort of sexual content and things that parents wouldn't want their kid exposed to. There's a sort of subjective viewpoint there that we have to kind of figure out and deal with. But in terms of I remember as a kid, this is how I discovered a love for both reading and writing, was reading stuff. I remember going into public libraries and feeling dirty that I was sneaking into the adult grown-up sections to find books to read. And I'd hide and read them in the library because I was afraid I'd be told I wasn't allowed to read them. And for some reason, that's the thing that pops into my head with this. Is what I don't want any kid to ever feel like they have to hide and read anything. And there's always going to be content that they probably are too young for or whatever. What my experience with kids is, as a former teacher and having lots of nieces and nephews around me all the time, is that even if they read something that wasn't necessarily appropriate for their age, they either don't fully understand it or it prompts them to start asking questions about it. And I don't think either of those things is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
personal hot take.
I'm glad and also saddened by the fact that someone like James Patterson is now experiencing this. But as a queer person and as someone who writes in the queer genre, book bans have been happening in our genre significantly for the past few years. And the arguments for what that content is comparable to books that are not even on the list. So the fact that this is finally happening to some bigger names, maybe that'll shed some change. Maybe that'll shed some light on the topic. But this has been an issue that has been nonstop, and it's been frustrating as someone who would like to remember. I remember the times in which I wasn't seen in the books that I read. And so I feel like that's getting taken away by people who read in my genre.
Yeah, and it's been interesting here. There's something going on in one of the counties in Michigan where a prosecutor is threatening to arrest a librarian for a book they have in the public library. And, I'm just like, okay, you're policing schools, I get it. But when we're getting down to banning books from public libraries, I really think we need to take a hard look at that. And I love the librarian's response as well. You know where I am. I'm in my office Monday to Friday. So come arrest me,
right.
But yeah, it's,
I mean, it really comes down to, we're in a country where we're supposed to have freedom of speech, that should spread to printed word, written word, and, video, audio, whatever. It should be across the board. And the second anybody is allowed to step in there and nix something, it becomes a problem because, who has the right to do that for everybody else? And I don't think we'll ever agree that is a right that somebody should have. I think, to just touch on JP's point, I think it's good that this has happened to a big name author, somebody who's got a loud voice. Jim is not the guy you want to pick on for this sort of thing, for a lot of reasons. But I mean, the part that they don't talk about in these various stories is he gives away millions every year to, fund literacy, to get kids reading, to teach kids how to read in places where they normally can't. He gives away millions of dollars to teachers to fund their libraries every year. He's all over that. And, I can only name a handful of authors that are actually, putting their money where their mouth is. And he is definitely one of them. So yeah, I'm glad, at least there's going to be a voice behind this. I don't know where it's going to go, but at least it's, it's not just being whispered about. Somebody's out there shouting.
Definitely.
And I want to make one quick PSA. Don't put your money where your mouth is. It's very unsanitary.
It is true. Don't do that. Well, in a complete 180 turn of emotions, Mattel will be forming its own publishing imprint. So we all know Mattel. It's a toy company, and they are planning in 2024 to launch a publishing imprint. So it plans on expanding fan favorite characters, storylines, and worlds. So it's an intellectual property-driven strategy. I think that this is interesting, and I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are.
Well, I tell you, I've bought a lot of books that I guess could have been Mattel because my kid was Thomas the Train obsessed, and I've had a million of them. So I think that's a smart move on their part to do that in house and, churning out those Barbies and those Thomas books that all the kids buy. I can understand why they're going to go that route because, the books are pretty short. The stories are, pretty short, and it's just filled with the graphics. I mean, I think it's a smart move from a money-making perspective for sure.
Well, there's a certain organization with a mouse as its front person that's been doing this for a very long time. Speaking to the business side of this, one of the things that I've seen them do is they actually, they've got tons of material, tons of books, tons of series, all out there. Most of those books at this point are written under pen names that Disney actually owns. So they decide, okay, we're going to create a book series based on our character, which, they've got full right to do. But they take it further. They say, okay, well, the author behind this book is going to be named X, and they create a fictitious author name, which basically becomes a trademarked entity. So from a copyright standpoint, it will always be in copyright. Then they go out and they hire ghostwriters to write those novels under that name. And it's a good payday for those people that are doing it. It's not a bad gig to get, but they don't get credit in any way for doing it. If somebody could write 4 books in a series, if they have a dispute or they decide they want a little bit more money and that entity isn't willing to pay it to them, they're out the door, they bring in somebody else. And from a reader standpoint, there's no change. Where I get really concerned with this is, with the things that we've seen with AI, and I don't want to circle back to that, but we need to talk about it. It's getting to the point where it's going to be able to write books, in the next few years. And companies like this, that are creating these types of things where the author is fictitious, everything across the board is all strictly about the bottom line. Those are going to be the first people that are going to jump on using AI to create these, titles and keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately go to doom and gloom when I see this.
Don't go to doom and gloom though. Okay, here's
I know you're excited about novels, for Barbie and whatever else.
No, here's Uncle Kevin's out of line perspective on AI again. But to me, what I think is evolving and what I think is going to happen is the formation of a new market, a new opportunity. Right. So, in the vein of the obstacle is the way, the whole Stoic philosophy, the way I see this is we'll soon, if not already, be able to start advertising ourselves, our books as authentically human generated. Like this book was written by an authentic human, certified human written, something like that. And I think there is definitely an audience that will gravitate to that, because I encounter people all the time who get mad at the mere mention of AI and go into tirades about it and say they'll never read something written by AI, never listen to audio narrated by AI because reasons, and not necessarily logical reasons. But I think we've got opportunity here, not necessarily doom and gloom. My take.
Thank you, AI Kevin.
And that is my love letter to my AI overlords. Thank you for your digital sustenance.
We appreciate that.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsor, Laterpress. Laterpress is a platform built to help authors declare independence. It lets authors create digital books and sell them directly to readers through a branded website. Laterpress is free to publish on and doesn't take any commission on direct sales. It's one of the most effective ways readers can directly support authors they love. Get started today at laterpress.com.
And speaking of someone authentically human, JD, who's up this week?
This week we've got Tracy Clark. She's the author of the highly acclaimed Cassandra Raines Chicago Mystery Series and a 2-time winner of the Sue Grafton Award. Her latest novel is called Hide, and it released in January. Here she is, Tracy Clark.
So you have a new crime novel out, Hide, the first book in your Harriet Foster series. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Well, it's a straight up police procedural. We are following Detective Harriet Foster and her team of homicide detectives. And we find Harriet coming back off of a couple of months of leave or something happened. But she's sort of coming in the first day, and she's met right away with a serial killer case that she has to solve along with these new people that she's meeting for the first time. So that's Hyde in a nutshell. This killer is sort of preying on the streets of Chicago, picking out young women, most of them with red hair. And so now she's got a problem. So that's what Hyde is. My first serial killer book. It was a little creepy to write. It's probably a little creepy to read, but it's kind of. I think it did okay.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it just because of the characters are so great, and she's got not only a killer to deal with, but a really awful partner. So that always makes for some good
I
conflict.
kind of like that conflict, that tension. I love putting stuff in characters' way just to figure out how they're going to get out of it. So I piled as much stuff as I can think of to put on her. She's got a tragedy. She's got all this trauma, new place, new boss, new team. And then on top of all of that, the cherry on top of the cake is the serial killer. So, she's got a lot to deal with.
Yeah, she does. And you've said before that you write more character-driven versus plot-driven novels. Tell us all your secrets for making characters painfully real.
I just sort of listen. I think most writers do, don't they? We're observers. We're the weird person in the corner at the Starbucks, sort of listening to the conversation at the next table. That's what we do. That's how we find our characters. So I found Harriet sort of that way. She wasn't talking to me at first, and I sort of had to dig and try to find out who she was and what made her tick and why she sort of stayed motivated. And so those things you learn by just observing human nature, observing the people around you. You might find a characteristic in your aunt or your uncle or your cousin, but you sort of meld all that stuff together and you sort of build a book person. That's what writing is. You're building a person to sort of ape the real thing on the page, and then you sort of build a story around there. At least I do. Those who outline sort of have a different process. I don't. And so I have to find my story and my characters page by page. So that's kind of how I do it. That's how my brain works. And so far, knock wood, it seems to be working.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to me that you can pants a mystery because they're so detailed and they seem like they're so plotted, right? Because they all have to come together. How do you do that? How do you pants through a mystery?
Well, you don't write it all in one chunk, do you? You sort of go until you get stuck, which you often do. And then you have the option or the luxury of going back and sort of figure out where you sort of got off the trail, and you can go back and fix it. That first draft, you sort of have it there, that's your clay. And then you can sort of fix it and revise it and sort of find the holes where you sort of miss stuff. So the good thing about this writing biz is that you don't have to do it just one time through and then you have to hand it off to somebody. You have multiple times to sort of go back and sort of fill in and fix and raise the stakes. You might add new characters, you might take some away. You might find spots where your story sort of lags. You have an opportunity to fix that. So it's not all in one fell swoop. Yeah, you can go back and paint that wall many, many times, which is a good thing to do. And so that's how you do it. So we don't have an outline. We just sort of go. We get stuck. We get lost. Stuff doesn't work out. We have the luxury of going back and fixing it. So that's good.
So do you write yourself into corners sometimes?
Absolutely not. Yeah. There could be like a million corners in one novel. Yes, all the time. And then you have to sort of get up from your writing desk, right? And you just sort of pace around and try to figure out where you sort of lost that thread. And then you go back and you grab it and then you go on. So a million times. Yes.
Oh, I love that.
I'm stuck right now. I'm looking for an idea for the next book. No idea. I have no idea. I have my cast of characters, Harriet and her team. And I don't know what the case is. I don't know where what seasons it's going to be. I have nothing at this point, but I have to think about that. So, it's all process, it's all craft, it's all tension, it's all stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like when you don't have an idea.
Oh my God, it's the worst, isn't it?
It's the worst.
Where can I find this body?
So how do you go when you're looking for ideas and you're looking for the conflict of your story? How do you go about pushing that above stereotypical? What's your kind of process for that?
I think the answer to that is just sort of you dig really deep into character. At least it works for me. When you sort of figure out why people do what they do, what sort of motivates them to take this action as opposed to this one, I think you sort of elevate your stuff beyond the stereotypical because you're digging really deep. You're going to internal motivations and conflicts and stuff like that. And I think it gives characters a depth. If we just gave you just sort of the stereotypical mean cop, brash cop. There's not much there. There's not much to sort of grab onto. But if you figure out why they're that way, which we will find out with Lonergan, who is sort of in this first book, I mean, he's sort of stereotypical. He's sort of the gruff cop, old school cop, bam. But there's a reason why he's like that. And readers, I think, will find a little bit more about him in book 2 and 3. So, we're not all what we present ourselves to be. There's a lot of things going on and sort of moldering around under the surface. And that's the meat of what characters are. So I think that's how you sort of get beyond that stereotypical point. Just sort of dig in there, find out what makes them tick. What's that little flaw, that little thing that they sort of can't get, and then sort of highlight that.
So that kind of backstory beneath the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. Yeah. Just give it some layers, some depth, something to sort of grab onto.
Yeah. And I think you really saw that with Lonergan because, I mean, he's not very likable, but you keep hoping. He's got these little glimpses where you're like, maybe. And, and then he keeps disappearing. You're like, there's something going on with him, but we don't know what it is.
We'll see. We'll find out what's going on with him. But, most people are more than what they present. And it's the same with book people. You just have to sort of hang in there and try to figure out what is going on under that surface. So, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to talk a little bit about how you got started on your writing career. Tell me what you mean when you say you're an overnight success, 20 years in the making.
Well, it took a while. You have to sort of teach yourself how to write. You can take all the classes there are to take, which I did. College, high school, creative writing, all those classes I took. But at a certain point, you have to sort of do it yourself, kind of. Once you have that foundation and you know what the craft is or supposed to be, or you know what a story is supposed to be, then you have to sort of get in there and sort of move the words around on the page and sort of teach yourself how to do it successfully. So I did that for, more than 20 years, writing and rewriting and querying and getting those rejection letters back, in droves sometimes. But you just sort of have to keep going and sort of getting better. So that's what I did. And so when I sort of got that first book bought, by the time that happened, I had 2 other ones that I just kept writing. So I got rejected on that first one. I just kept writing and writing. These were the characters that I knew, so I kept writing about them. So when they took that first one, I had 2 others already done and in the can, so they took all 3. But that took years. I mean, years, really lean years where nobody gave a crap. Nobody was reading my stuff. Nobody knew anything about me. And you just have to sort of keep yourself going forward. So yeah, overnight success, more than 20 years in the making.
I think that's really smart. And I think that sometimes something new writers forget is like before you get an agent, that's the time that you kind of can relax because you can stockpile those books because it's only your time. And then once you get publishing deadlines, you got to go.
That's your time to sort of teach yourself how to do it successfully. Because once you sort of get to that point where somebody wants it and it's out there, then it becomes a job. Then it becomes a process and a machine and all the little gears are moving in this direction. And you sort of lose that opportunity to sort of go in there and sort of take the time to sort of teach yourself what you don't know. And I think that's valuable time. I don't lament it at all. Could have been a little quicker, in my opinion, but that was not wasted time. That was time that I needed to sort of figure out what I was doing wrong and how to fix it and then move forward.
So I'm curious, do you still read craft books or do you find now that would mess too much with your process now that you've kind of got your flow?
I think I'm at the jumping off point now. So I don't read the craft books. I kind of sort of absorb some of that stuff just by doing it. I'm pretty sure there are good ones out there, but you have to get to a point where you have to trust that you know what you're doing. You're not great at it. I don't think anybody sort of gets to a point where it's I can't learn anything else. Every time you do it, you learn a little bit more. You learn a better way of saying something or revealing a character. But that's stuff that you sort of have to learn with your fingertips on the laptop keys yourself. So I don't read craft books. They're great for those who sort of need that foundation, and most of us do. I had my phase where I did that. I wrote how to write a novel, how to write a mystery novel. I read all of those things, but at a certain point, you have to stop. And you have to be the person who knows what they're doing. And it takes a while. It takes a while to get to that point. But when you do, you'll know it because you have your process going. So And for those new writers out there, I'd say if that's what you need to know what that foundation is, do it, take the time. And then for those of us who have sort of been out here, moving the words around for a while, you have to trust yourself that you know what you're doing and then proceed.
Right. Yeah. When your golf swing is working, you don't mess with it. You just keep
Don't
going.
Don't mess with it. Don't
That's
jinx
awesome.
it.
So you work as a newspaper editor in Chicago?
Yeah. That's my day job. So my writing schedule is 5:30 to 8 o'clock. I have my bowl of Cheerios at 8. 8:30, I'm swilling over to editing. So I edit op-eds and comic strips and puzzles and all that fun stuff for the newspaper. And then, that's my day. If I come up with an idea during the course of that day, I put it on a Post-it note and put it on my laptop for the next morning. And that's how I write my books in segments. That's how I get it done.
That's nice. So you block out that 3 hours of time with your Cheerios every day, and
that's it.
away you go.
That's it.
And so what does a writing day look like for you for that 3 hours?
Well, I'm at my writing desk. Got my glass of V8, and I have a handful of nuts, and I sort of have an idea of where I sort of left off the morning before, and that's where I start. So whatever comes out for that period of time, that's what I've got. If I can sort of crunch in a couple of maybe an hour or so at the end, if my brain is not fried by then, I'll do it. And then, of course, the weekends, I sort of try to get more time in because there's nobody else sort of asking for it. So that's how I do it. I'm working from home, which is great because of the pandemic. But when I worked in the office, my lunch time would be my writing time. So I only had an hour. So I'm doing pretty well now. I mean, I got more time going, but for that hour was the only thing I had. So, day job, hour writing, day job. And then by the end of the day, I was pretty much toast. But so I got a little bit more time now. So it's kind of cool.
That's cool. I love that you did that in an hour a day. That's fantastic. So do you think about your writing then when you're not writing?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. I'm thinking about it right now. All the time, because you still have a story to tell. So I know where I left off this morning. I know where I have to go tomorrow morning. And I'm sort of thinking about whether or not I'm on the right path, whether the story is working, whether I can get a little bit more out of the character and their conflicts. So yeah, I'm thinking about it all the time, looking for a better way to sort of build that mousetrap. And I don't think that ever goes away, even for, everybody. I mean, anybody who writes anything, you're always sort of having these gears turning in your head to sort of make sure that you're making the right choices. You have to make a million of them while you're writing a book, but you want to make sure that you're making the right ones, you're going in the right direction, that the story is flowing, the characters are flowing. And so you're always constantly working on it.
Nice. So as an editor, I'm curious what your revision process looks like. Do you do multiple drafts, or do you do it all like one, keep going back over it, or what's that look like?
Well, my first draft is slow draft because I'm editing as I go. You're not supposed to. All the prevailing wisdom is that you're just supposed to write and just leave it, and you can revise later. I can't do that. If there's a comma out of space, I kind of know that that's there, and it bugs me. 3 pages. If I sort of pass it, I know it just messes me up. So I edit as I go for that first draft, which means that I have a pretty clean draft when I'm done. And then the revisions, mostly for me, are whether or not I've gotten most of the story. So I'm changing scenes, I'm changing characters, not so much the grammatical part, because I sort of take care of that on the front end. But I'm looking for ways to sort of heighten the story, heighten the character confrontations, raise the stakes, make sure I'm in the right direction. So that's my revision. And I go back maybe 2 or 3 times, as much as they will give me, to sort of make those things right. And hopefully at the end of it, I've got a story that says something. So it's a long process. It's not so much as fun as writing the first draft, but it has its charms.
Nice. And do you use readers at any stage of the process, like alpha or beta readers, or do you just give it right to your editor?
I do it both. I have a couple of friends that I sort of, back and forth. I read their stuff, they read mine. That's great. It's always good to sort of see another set of eyes on your stuff. But then I just sort of give it off. I mean, hand it off, and that's let them do what they do with it and give it back to me and tell me what's wrong with it.
Nice. So I noticed in your writing, like you do a really masterful job of increasing tension and complications as you move through the story. Do you have any tips for writers how to kind of build that?
I don't know. It's you sort of have to feel it, don't you? It's a story sort of has a flow to it, and you kind of know when you have to sort of make those shifts. I kind of write when I sort of look at it, kind of like television. So you know when that'll spike right before the commercial, where that's sort of a heightened thing. That's so I kind of write like that. I sort of write at the end of a chapter, sort of hook you to the so you can go to the next one. It's kind of like a commercial break. So I sort of think of it like that. But I'm always looking for places to sort of keep the reader's eyes on my pages. So whatever I have to do, that's what I do. So I spend a lot of time sort of figuring out what those spaces would be, what needs to be said at the end of this chapter to make you want to go to the next one. So I spend a lot of time on that. And, I think, you can sort of massage it a little bit, but the goal ultimately is to sort of keep the reader reading. So whatever you've got to do, whatever process works for you, use it and go with it.
Yeah. So cliffhangers at the end of every chapter.
Cliffhangers are good. Something happening to your favorite character is also good. Anything to keep them reading.
So you're talking about keeping the reading. So do you write for your reader or for yourself or for both? Who do you think about more when you're writing?
Well, I kind of think about just characters and story to begin with. I think I probably think about the reader more in the revision process, because I'm also looking for places to sort of close things up and make them tighter, leaner, more readable. So I link at the reader after the fact, once the story is there and I know what it is, I know what happens to my characters, know whether or not I feel it's working, and then I sort of think about how I can sort of tighten it up, put a bow on top of it so that the readers are satisfied. So me first, then readers second.
I like that. So in this book, there's a lot of depth to it. There's political issues and all kinds of social issues that are coming up. Is that something you think about, like layering that depth into your serial killer book, or what does that look like?
I don't really consciously think about it, but I mean, Harriet is a homicide detective working in a city with about 2 million people in it, a city with issues like any other urban large city. So it's kind of difficult to sort of write about the characters and whatever story I put them in without sort of pinging on what's happening in the real world, what happens in the neighborhoods, what happens in a department with maybe only a small portion of the department female and of color. So you can't sort of get away with sort of at least pinging on some of the issues, or otherwise, what are you doing? It doesn't make sense. It reads like fantasy. If everything was happy and if there was no tension, there would be no story. So she has to come up against, she's a Black woman in a department not sort of set up for her, and she's got to deal with some of those tensions and some of those conflicts. She's from a community where she might be seen as an enemy. She's working for the opposing force, but still she's a member of the community. So she's got to deal with some of the stuff that happens in the community that might not apply to her. And so she might get some of that sort of flashback too. So all of those things are sort of churning around, and to not write about them would be kind of silly.
So I'm curious about writing female characters in what have been traditionally male roles. How do you make that different, or what are the challenges of doing that?
Well, I'm not the first one to sort of do that. I mean, that great wave of female crime writers of the early 80s, Grafton, Paretsky, Eleanor Taylor Bland, all of them sort of introduced that phase of it. And I think what making female protagonists the stars of your story as opposed to men is that we sort of add a different dimension or a different level. I don't think we knew a great deal about male protagonists' private lives before that. I mean, these females came onto the page and we knew the struggles that they had on the personal level as in addition to their professional things. They had lives. They had boyfriends, they had husbands, they had dogs and pets and responsibilities. So I think it sort of broadened the look of what a PI protagonist would be, or a female homicide detective would be. So we're getting the job, we're getting the personal. It's a more well-rounded representation, I think. And I think when you sort of add the color element or the cultural element too, again, it broadens it even more. So I think it just adds more to whatever the stereotype of the rough cop would be, gives it another dimension, which is also good for readers and also the people who write them.
Yeah, I agree. And you write about Chicago. Obviously, you live there.
Yeah.
What do you love about Chicago? What are the things that you love? And do you use that like a character in the settings?
Oh, it is very much a character. I mean, I can't get around it. I mean, we've got neighborhoods in Chicago that are distinctive. Everyone's different. Different people live there, different pace, a different vibe. It's sort of fun to sort of show people those wonderful things. It's not just, downtown or, the magnificent mile. And there are neighborhoods and working people here. And I kind of like showcasing them. So Chicago's great. I mean, we got the same problems every other city has, but we got some good people here. So it's kind of fun to sort of show people that.
What are your favorite things to showcase about Chicago?
Just sort of the hidden places. In Hyde, this killer is sort of targeting these people, but he's hiding the bodies in places most people don't see. So on a Lower Wacker, where it's dark and gritty, rats crawling all over the place. The River Walk, it's nice and glitzy. At night is a different place. So it's just sort of that juxtaposition of, this is great. There's something else that happens once the lights go down. And I kind of like that sort of duality of it.
Excellent. So I'm curious about in your writing process, what's your favorite part of writing? Do you like first drafting? Do you like editing? Do you like being done? What's your
I like being done. I like being absolutely done. All the revisions have been done. We've sort of decided on this is the story. We've done as much with it as we can, my editors and myself. We can't imagine sort of tinkering with it anymore. I like that phase of it. It's done. It's out of my hands. I'm handing it off to somebody else. Do with it what you will. I'm on to the next thing. I probably would like the first draft process better if I knew where my story was going. I can understand how that might be an asset for outliners. They sort of know where it's going. They know what's going to happen on page 55. They know how it's going to end. They know who the murderer is. Everything's neat and clean. All they have to do is get to the end. I would love to have that experience. I just don't have that in my brain. So first drafts are tough for me because I have absolutely no idea where everything is going. I don't know what I'm going to do with the characters. I don't know what they're going to do to me. And so it's picking my way through. I wish there was less stress on that end of it, but I like being done. I can sort of deal with sort of getting through the story on the first draft, and then the revisions are kind of easy, but it's all a process.
Yeah, and I've heard some pantsers say that they feel like if they had an outline, that they would lose interest in the story because it wouldn't be a surprise to them where it's going.
That's kind of something to that because I've tried an outline before, and there's something in my brain that says, here's the outline, you've written your story, you're done. And you haven't even started. I mean, there's like a weird little thing in my brain that says, oh, the story's done, you've written it, and you haven't written it. And I would rather just write it and then see where it goes. And so that I don't have that frustration. So I have to build a story on the page. That's how my brain has to work, and just go ahead and stop whining about it and get it done.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So this is your first serial killer book. I'm curious what else, is there anything else that you're interested in exploring in your writing that's different than you've done before? Or where do you think you'll go next?
I've got another Harriet to do. So fall comes out December this year. And then I have another that I have to do in that series. Where I go next, I don't know. They might ask for another Harriet, or I might be onto something else. I don't know. I don't know. I think crime is sort of my niche. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll try to write a male character. I'm a male protagonist. I'll see where I go with that. It's all sort of teaching yourself something new. So in a different path to take. It might be interesting to sort of see what I could do with a male protagonist. We'll see. Yeah, some criminal or something.
Do you use real crime cases in your crime, or are they all kind of fictional?
No, they're all fictional. I don't do true crime, not yet. That might be something that I can look into. But yeah, there's all out of my imagination. I sort of see a spot that might be a good place to sort of put a body, and then I see what builds from that. So everything's on the table.
Excellent. Do you ever see yourself doing another genre, or do you think you'll stay in the mystery and crime genre?
Kind of like mystery and crime. I think that's my sweet spot. I don't see myself doing historical fiction. Too much research.
Yeah.
I'm lazy. I'm a lazy writer.
Do you do research when you're writing?
As much as I need to. I'm not a police officer, so I have to sort of figure out how they work. I ask questions a lot of police officers that I know. But other than that, no, I don't particularly care for it. It just sort of takes away from the writing. I just do enough of it so that it's authentic enough for readers to sort of believe that I know what I'm doing. And if I sort of get it wrong, someone will tell me. But otherwise, I'm just going for it.
So just have a couple of officers on speed dial and good to go.
I got some. I got some I can ask them questions of, so I don't get too far off.
Excellent. And as we wrap up, I just have one final question. If you could offer one piece of advice to new and aspiring authors, what would it be?
Well, I will give aspiring writers the same advice that Eleanor Taylor Bland gave me way back in the day. And she told me to just keep writing. Keep writing. It might take you years. It might take you a month to sort of get to the point where you want to be. But you have to be there when your shot comes. And the only way you're going to do that is if you're sitting at your writing desk with your pad or your laptop and you're writing the stories that you were meant to write. So I would tell them to just keep writing. Believe that you have something that other people will want to read eventually when your shot comes, and just be there when your shot comes.
So what fascinated me about Tracy is that she pantses mysteries, and I've read her mysteries, and I just don't know how you do that. Like, it just blows my mind as someone who would need to outline that kind of thing. How much harder do you think it is to pants a mystery novel versus outlining it?
I've been there, done that. And like, I actually did it this morning. So the book that I'm working on right now, fully outlined from beginning to end. I had a particular scene where the police are talking to somebody in a conference room. And like, she had mentioned how every chapter should end on some type of, mini cliffhanger. This one, as I wrote it, didn't have a mini cliffhanger. So instead of ending it the way I had it in the outline, I had her pull out her cell phone and she shows the police a picture of something that, basically just played a huge part in the story. Now, it's great for that chapter. The problem is, every chapter in that outline now needs to be adjusted to deal with that, particular aha moment. So, it's a catch-22. If you're capable of seeing the finish line, and personally, I've been there. I did it with the whole 4MK series. I think if you know how you're going to end the book, your subconscious is going to eventually get you there, no matter how many little mini cliffhangers you throw in front of yourself. If you're pantsing that novel and you have no clue how you're actually going to end it, I think that's how you end up with a 300,000 or 400,000 word book, that's so far off in the weeds, you don't know where to go.
Yeah, I think you're kind of the reality is you're either someone who edits or not, and someone who, the idea here is you're going to edit that book to make it fit. You're going to take that ending that you came up with, that clever twist or whatever, and you're going to go back and you're going to edit that in. You can't pants and not edit, though, in my opinion. Like, you can't decide I'm going to just riff the entire book and then not go back and do the editing. And I know there's a lot of authors. I think like Dean Wesley Smith is one I've talked to numerous times who, he basically doesn't edit. He sort of edits as he goes a little, but like, he doesn't loop back to the beginning of the book and work in details and things. It flows out of him. I don't think you can do that and be a full-on pantser. Not with something as complicated as mystery.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think that there's that level of going back and editing, but especially in like the whodunit mystery, I've heard of a lot of authors who write in a way that you're incriminating almost everyone and you're laying clues that it could be anyone. And then you reach a conclusion at some point in which you reveal that it had truly been XYZ this whole time. And then of course you go back and edit. But I think that there's merit in that whodunit category where you can kind of expand on incriminating multiple people and just kind of pantsing it as you go.
Yeah, well, Agatha Christie did that. She was probably one of the first, and really good at it. And I need to look it up. I honestly don't know if she was a pantser or if she outlined. So I don't know if she knew who did it, when she started that book, or if she did exactly like you said, just blamed it on everybody and then eventually picked whichever one made the most sense. I think the key to all of it, whether you're pantsing or you're working off an outline, is to keep track of these little red herrings that you throw out there. So I've got a second monitor that's on my desk. Every time I create a little twist or some type of open thread, I throw it on that list, just to make sure that I'm aware of it, because if you get 50,000 words later, it's pretty easy to forget something. And then when I wrap up that book, I make sure everything on that list has been checked off. If it hasn't been checked off or dealt with, then I either remove it or I go back and I close up that thread. I think that's where I see a lot of authors actually drop the ball. They especially early on in a debut or first, second novel, they tend to create a lot of these crazy twists and they just don't identify them. They don't finish them up. So you finish up that book and you're like, yeah, but what happened with whatever? And that creates a dissatisfied reader that lowers your reviews. If you can wrap up each of those, you look like such a hero at the end of that book. It's like, I can't believe that person thought of that 400 pages ago and he mentioned this and now all of a sudden it's coming back to play out here. Like it could be a total fluke, but if you do it, you look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
What I've always wanted to be able to do is use a murder board.
A murder board.
I don't think I can successfully do it because I don't think that way necessarily. Like the way they map
all
that
the
stuff
strings
out with the strings and yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think that way, but I've always wanted to be that guy.
Well, that's honestly, that's how I kept it straight in the 4MK series. And, it was in my Scrivener document. So every couple of chapters, I just, I would take a copy and paste of the previous one and I would update it with whatever the new clue is. And I would just keep going. I fully planned to take those out. And when I sent it off to the editor, he was like, no, let's leave that in there because it helps the reader figure out what's going on too. So like initially I created it, as a murder board for myself just to keep all the facts together. But it became a tool that the readers used. I think Jeffrey Deaver does that quite a bit as well.
Or you can just go true Agatha Christie and just if you don't know who did it, just have everybody do it at the end. Just here we go. Everybody take a shot. We'll get into
what
that.
you could do for a good extra thing that kind of ties in is supply a murder board with pictures and newspaper clippings and string and just give it to your reader and they can, as they go along, create the murder board. There you go. You're welcome.
I'm on board.
Appreciate that.
I'm on board with this.
Isn't that why they invented Pinterest?
Yeah. For murder boards.
Yeah.
Pinterest
That's right.
for murder boards.
For murder boards.
So Tracy also talks about that she read a lot of craft books, but now doesn't because that's going to mess up her writing process. Curious about you guys. Do you still read craft books or do you also feel like that's going to break your perfect golf swing?
The only one that I've reread over and over again is On Writing by Stephen King. And the funny thing is, if you actually read that, 70% of the book is just autobiographical. And then at the end, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to be talking about writing stuff. And he just throws in a little bit. But it inspires me to do this, on a daily basis. The only other one that I really like is called Reacher Said Nothing, which I've mentioned before. It's just a reporter sits on Lee Child's couch as he's writing a book, like 4 feet away from him, just staring over Lee's shoulder as he goes and just kind of outlines the process. Aside from that, I don't want to break my golf swing. And one of the things I tend to tell people, especially the ones that have like 500 different craft books on their shelf, like don't buy one unless that person is further ahead in their career than you are. Make sure whoever is writing that book actually knows what they're talking about, because so many, authors or wannabe authors, people that have $300 a month in sales are out there creating craft books. And like, that's not the person. Like, I don't want to get driving lessons from somebody who doesn't own a car. Get advice from somebody who's been there, done that, and actually knows what they're doing.
And I think you mentioned On Writing, which is one I've read numerous times and really enjoy. And I think the reason I like that, I don't particularly like to read like straight up craft books that are like a how-to or maybe they're supposed to be like a textbook or something. They don't do anything for me. They don't help me. But the ones that I really enjoy are ones like On Writing, or the books that like Terry Brooks has one called Sometimes the Magic Works. They're almost more autobiography than anything, but they do throw in sort of, it's like a behind the scenes look at what they actually think and do. And so you're seeing, they're not trying to break it down and describe it to you as like a mentor talking to a classroom or something. They're telling you, hey, I did this and this was going on in my life and this fun thing happened. One of my favorites is Piers Anthony has a book called But What of Earth that went through like revision hell when I think the publisher sold to a different company or something, and he ended up with like 8 different editors on this book. And so what he did was print the original, because the one that went to press failed miserably, but he did a reprint of the original manuscript with all the notes in the margin. So you and then his commentary on that, and so you're able to read through that and see the sorts of things that an author might get back, and the conflicts that can create. That was much more helpful to me than reading really any craft book.
I honestly wish authors would put that kind of thing out, because we all have it, like we've got that draft we send off to our editor, and then we get the one that comes back, with all those changes in it. And I'm with you. I love reading those. I've got the Needful Things sitting over here next to me. It's the pages from King's typewriter with handwritten notes and all the margins from King, from David Morrell, the guy who created Rambo. He actually had it because he was a beta reader. But like, to me, seeing, what minds like that, go through a book and what they decide needs to come out and what needs to be changed, that is just so important. It's like just such an incredible peek behind the curtain of the process. I'd love to see somebody, just a big name author, just take that first draft of the book, and put that side by side with the editor comments and the final draft. And, we made this change because I'd be all over that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good way to try to advance your craft. I like that. And I think that's a good suggestion, because you always want to keep improving. And it's like, well, what do you do? And that sounds like a fascinating suggestion. I would totally read all of those, but yeah.
Well, let's talk James Patterson into being one of the first authors in our brand new publishing venture.
Perfect. So one other thing that I thought was interesting that she was talking about was gearing reading towards yourself versus your readers, and that she kind of did both, but thought about it at different times. So when she's writing a first draft, she's writing for herself, but then in revision is gearing that towards readers. What do you think about readers? Do you think more about yourself, or who are you writing to when you're writing?
Personally, I'm selfish. I'm just writing for myself. I'm basically telling a story that I would want to read, something that I would have wanted to find on the bookshelf that's not there. To a large extent, I guess I'm also writing for my wife because she's my first reader. So like, I know what kind of comments I'll get back from her if I do something wrong. So I try to satisfy that. If I'm working on a book with Patterson, I know what that phone call from him is like, where he's telling me where I screwed up, and so I can hear him in the back of my head, with every sentence, so I basically at this point know what needs to come out before it goes off to him, because I don't want to hear about it later. I think, all those things kind of come into play.
Yeah, I think I do that too. It was depending what genre I'm writing on. I will write it maybe for myself, but one other person that I know that really loves that genre, I'll be like, oh, this will make them laugh, or they'll think this is cool, that type of thing. Yeah.
There's definitely stuff that I'll put into a book that is secretly for a specific person. But for the most part, everything I write is really, I'm the audience. I went through that whole exercise of defining my ideal reader, and then realized that I was just basically describing myself, same interests, same everything. So, it makes it really easy. I don't have, by the way, JD, I'm very envious that your wife is your first reader. Like my wife's barely my last reader. It's really difficult to get her. She loves the books, but her complaint is I will put out so many and so rapidly. At least this was the early complaint, that there's other things she wants to read. So I don't get that benefit.
Well, lately I've been getting, just once I would like to read one of your books finished, because like I'll show her the cover of a book, and like she's read 6 different endings for that title. Like the middle has been changed 4 different times, so yeah, that's her latest thing.
Yeah. I remember there was a comment from, I can't remember if it was Brandon Sanderson or someone in his writing group, that someone in that writing group had read it finished and was like, oh yeah, I forgot you could actually write, because they're all just reading the early drafts and that kind of thing.
Ouch.
Anyways,
take that, Sanderson.
And with that, JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Kim Sherwood coming on. She's a novelist and lecturer in creative writing at the University of Edinburgh. Her latest book, it's in the James Bond universe. It's called Double or Nothing, and releases April 11th. So Kim Sherwood.
All right. Sounds great. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.